Okay, well, there's a lot of things going on in there. You started with cryptocurrencies, and then you mentioned inflation, and then you mentioned
Yes.
pandemic. So there's a lot of things all interacting there. I should say that the digital currencies, like China's a leader in that right now, and moving to digital currency. And it's clear why China's a leader. The digital currencies, the way they're being done there, create records of transactions. They make things less anonymous. China is very much likes to keep track of what's going on in its economy, and provides them more information. I'm not sure that will happen everywhere. I don't think that the hegemony that the dollar has, that the dominance of the dollar, is very much related to the efficiency of the. I don't think it'll be affected much by digital currency. Let me explain why. I think that if you are a Korean firm, let's say you are exporting to the world, and you're buying inputs from Brazil, for example. And when a Korean firm makes a contract with a Brazilian firm, you might wonder why they don't use local currencies. They don't. They use dollars. So why does a Brazilian firm and a Korean firm contract in dollars? Well, it's because of exchange rate risk. If you are the Korean firm and you have export contracts in dollars, you do not want to be buying in Brazilian currency or Korean currency. You want to hedge your risk by using the same currency for all of your contracts. And I think as long as most of the world is denominating their contracts in dollars, there won't be an incentive for a first mover to say, well, I'd rather use a digital currency, because if that digital currency isn't linked to the dollar, they create exchange rate risk for themselves. That is very, very difficult. So I don't think that the digital currencies by themselves are much threat to the dominance of dollars in international transactions. I think we've coordinated on dollars, and I think people will continue to use dollars for international transactions. I think the inflation. Well, of course, if inflation in dollars was too severe, it might become unreliable, and people might decide that it was a dangerous currency to transact in. COVID will likely reduce, it makes international trade less desirable because it makes the supply chains less reliable. But I don't see that favors any currency relative to the dollar. I don't foresee a weakening of the dollar in the near term. I don't think that's going to happen. Well, I think digital currencies, let's distinguish digital currencies from cryptocurrencies. There are government-sponsored digital currencies that are growing. I think digital currencies are going to become more and more important. They're just very convenient for transactions. We already have, just even the last 10 years, all around the world, we've seen big changes in the way we make payments. Once upon a time we did everything with cash and checks, and then credit cards, and now we have apps, and I use Apple Pay on my watch all the time, and Venmo and Zelle and these other. So more and more we're moving away from our way of transacting is changing, and digital currencies are going to provide a convenient way to do transactions. But private cryptocurrencies, things like Bitcoin is expensive to use. Bitcoin is very volatile. I think that for currencies, and it's really a niche product, very, a really small fraction of people actually use or transact in Bitcoin. It's volatile. People are afraid of it. It's attracted some people because they've made so much money. It's risen so much, and a lot of people have made a lot of money, and that attracts people. But I don't expect it to be widely used for transactions. I think that there are attempts now to issue cryptocurrencies that are so-called stable coins that are easy to use, but are also linked to the dollar. But that creates that requires regulation, because that creates the risk of things like that look like bank runs. There can be current runs on a currency. And so I think the bottom line is, the short answer to your question is that I think the success of cryptocurrencies as a means of transaction is going to depend on the emergence of light-handed but successful regulation. I think that unregulated cryptocurrencies are not going to ever be a popular way to transact, and that whether or not cryptocurrencies succeed as a way of transacting is going to depend on whether we manage to regulate them to make them safe, but not so much as to make, as to create all the problems that come with excessive regulation, like we've had in our financial system. So first of all, there are details that have to be gotten right when you're doing market designs. I like the idea of using auctions and setting a price, putting a cap on carbon emissions and using auctions to determine the price. I think it encourages people to find good ways to reduce carbon. I think we do need to reduce carbon emissions. But many of the things that people have been trying have not worked well. For example, there are offsets where somebody says, well, I won't cut trees, and that should count as an offset for carbon. And the problem with that is if they don't cut trees over here, they agree not to cut the trees in one place, and then instead they go cut trees somewhere else. The transactions, the promises aren't real. So I think it's very important that we measure correctly what carbon reductions are taking place, that the only things that are traded are real and valuable reductions in the amount of carbon in order for that to succeed, reducing emissions. And then, of course, we need international agreement. And I think China is only recently, until very recently, China was building coal plants at an amazing rate and making things much worse. And we need them to get on board with the rest of the world and take seriously that that reductions will be. I think in China too, by the way, there have been badly designed markets that are intended to reduce emission, where what they've done is they've said, well, we're going to apply this to the biggest companies. And what happens is the companies subcontract their production to smaller companies that are not subject to the same regulation. You have to get this, it has to be done sensitively and it has to be done well. So just saying you're going to create a carbon market is not a panacea.